Turning now to the World Economic Forum happening in Davos, Switzerland. Donald Trump's the first sitting United States president to attend the forum since Bill Clinton did it nearly 2 decades ago. What might President Trump accomplish in Davos, and what potential pitfalls exist there for him? Let's talk about that with Max Wolff, the chief economist for the Phoenix Group. Excuse me, he is in New York. Okay, how's it going to play? What do you expect from the president's visit to Davos?
So I think the president goes there in part because he's probably long wanted to, and this is a big opportunity. Also, I think it's a muscle flex for him and many of his supporters, the notion that a lot in the global elite who are kind of feted and fetting each other at Davos had expected him to be a bit of a more problematic for them than he turned out to be, and he wants to celebrate what he sees as his successes, which would otherwise be known to us in economics as the high points of the U.S. macroeconomy. And in fairness, many of the basic metrics of the U.S. macroeconomy are quite healthy now. Good stock market performance, if not every day, most days, and an unusually large number of days, pretty good economic growth, and some major, perhaps overdue rationalization of some regulation, along with a lot of controversy. And I think he wants to kind of celebrate himself and try to get these people who were doubters to celebrate him and his record.
Max, how's the America First idea going to play?
So look, you don't go to an international organization and tell them that you love yourself more than you love them and that you think they should all love you more than they love themselves and be taken terribly seriously. That appeals to people who feel like they're part of the group that would be first, and it's just as unappealing to everyone else as you might imagine. And this is, of course, a dedicated multilateralist jamboree, and so coming there with a unilateralist sort of self-love message is a bit risky.
On the eve of his departure, he signed an order slapping tariffs on solar panels and washing machine imports. What's the implication of that?
So these are both pretty minor. Most folks think from a macroeconomic perspective, it's a little bit of a test case to see what happens and what results occur. I think it's very important to watch how it plays out kind of behind the scenes and in various editorials and newspapers. It's always fun and beneficial in the short term to kind of unilaterally bluster and make self-improving moves. The big test of these moves is whether other people retaliate and sort of what happens when the dust settles. My guess is we won't see an immediate retaliation, but it will further chill the reception at an already somewhat snow-covered and cold Davos, Switzerland.
Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau used Davos to announce that Canada and 10 other countries have reached an agreement on a trade pact, a successor to Trans-Pacific. Trump pulled out of that. You think the timing of Trudeau's announcement was a slap at Trump?
So I think plenty of things going on at Davos are there to position Davos and its leadership as sort of the 180-degree alternative to Donald Trump. I think Justin Trudeau has sort of had that position in North America to some extent, being the sort of young, suave, open, immigrant welcoming leader to juxtapose to Trump's relatively more stern approach to immigration and relatively more advanced age. So I do think there's some of that. Look, the TPP was an American program to counteract Chinese global influence. We pulled out of it. And I think people are trying to say that there is a future for multilateralism without America. And that is very much an attempt to reassure themselves and also puff their own chests out when they know that Donald Trump is coming there for a victory lap, whether or not they particularly wanted to play host to that particular event.
Trump maintains that the United States has been a victim of globalization. Is he right?
I don't know if there's a single U.S. victim. The United States has gained much more than we've lost overall as an economy. That being said, Trump and many other critics have rightly pointed out that globalization and trade have both winners and losers, and we've had concentrations in who are the great beneficiaries, and they have tended to be more affluent professionals on the coasts, and we have had concentrations of who are the great losers or the non-beneficiaries from trade, and that has been somewhat concentrated among the laboring classes and in the Midwest. I think the electoral map speaks to that, and I think that President Trump mined a pretty rich vein of reasonable resentment about international trade in the U.S., but I do think we have gained more than we've lost, and by the flip of that is, if the international order that presently exists is reshuffled, pretty dangerous for the U.S. If you're the top card and I shuffle the deck, the chance that you fall in the deck is statistically non-trivial.
The tax overhaul, it looks like it's playing well in Davos. Do you expect that?
Yeah, so look, I think that Donald Trump has more fans than some might have imagined, possibly even Donald Trump might have imagined in the Davos set, in part because he has cut the individual taxes of the folks who tend to gather there, as well as the corporate taxes of the folks who tend to gather there. And a lot of what people had feared was that a more kind of harsh populism, maybe personified by some members of his cabinet, would rule the day. And what we've got is much less of that, much more of a pro-business agenda with more pro-business legislation. So there are probably a few folks, even who will be critical of President Trump, who are privately benefited and far less critical and less sort of excitedly critical than they might have been had some of the more populist rhetoric turned into legislation.
Max, what would constitute for Trump a successful Davos conference?
So to be honest, I think the bar's not that high. I think if there are no kind of off-script harsh language, if there's no diplomatic or personal faux pas or misconduct, it will be very good in terms of the global reception at Davos and by the media. I think Trump's in a very difficult situation on a deeper level, which is he basically ran as the kind of guy who keeps people at Davos up at night, and it's now pretty clear that he's the kind of guy who's really excited to be invited to spend all night with the folks at Davos, and so he's got to sort of thread that needle carefully. Either one could be a problem, but my guess, bar's not that high. As long as there's no incident here, it's chalkable as a win.
Max, thanks so much. Hope to call on you again.
My pleasure.